Annyeonghaseyo, this is meowmurai. Let's continue our game of Despera Drops running on Nintendo Switch 2.
世界の果てまで逃げてみせる。
遅い。
これで問題ないか。
これでいいかな。
ラミ君、そういう表情もするんだって思って。
見えてないんじゃなかったの？
ようやく目が慣れてきて見えちゃったから。
そりゃたまには僕だってこういう顔もするよ。だってこうてかそんな意地悪なこと言う？
Rami was sulking. I giggled in amusement.
ごめんね。
もうしょうがないじゃん。女の子なんてこれまで近くにいなかったんだからさ、距離感とかわかんないよ。
そうなの？
路上で暮らしてた仲間はみんな男だったし、ここ数年はずっと一人で怪盗やってたからさ。だから君は世紀の大怪盗様初の弟子で初めて仲良くなった女の子ってわけ。
弟子って。
あれ違ったっけ？いっぱい教えたじゃん、忍び込み方とかさ。結構ミカっていい筋してるし、僕と同じぐらいいい感じの怪盗になりそうなんだよね。
そうかな。
そうだよ、身軽だし足音立てないように歩くのも上手になったしさ、十分怪盗としてやっていけるって。
He laughed, shoulders shaking with emotion. I got the impression he wanted to drive away the awkward atmosphere. His first apprentice. His first female friend. Those words sounded like music to my ears, though I didn't know why. I closed my eyes, feeling the vehicle rattle from side to side. I was no longer afraid of the dark. When the truck stopped to refuel, we discreetly opened the trailer door to check what was going on outside. Based on the road signs, it was safe to assume we'd made it to Liechtenstein. Looking at the shape of the mountains, I could tell the castle was close. This was a good place to get out. Rami and I exchanged glances, then nodded.
先に降りて。
That's true. Camu definitely needs help with his naming. I slowly climbed down from the trailer, trying to stay quiet and avoid detection. Right then, I heard the engine start up. Just as the truck was about to take off, Rami sprang out of the vehicle and closed the door. Seconds later, the truck began to move. It was a close call. It went on its way, so we put it out of our minds and hid along the side of the road before the next car came.
さすがに狭かったね。肩凝っちゃったよ。
ここで大丈夫だよね。
うん。ああ、でも一応方角を確認するからちょっと待ってて。
True to his word, Rami climbed a nearby tree. He quietly moved from one branch to another till he reached the top. Once he confirmed our way forward, he zoomed back down. Even during his descent, he didn't make a sound. I was in awe of him yet again.
よっと。バッチリ近くまで来てるよ。あそこの斜面を登った先に城の屋根が見えたから。で、そんなに僕を見てどうしたの？
相変わらず身軽だなって思って。
え、そう？
体操とかパルクールの選手とかになれそうだね。
パルクールの選手？あれって競技になってんの？
確か大会とかあったはずだよ。
へえ、ちょっと調べてみよっかな。
Rami's eyes shone with keen interest. Then his face went taut, and he looked up with determination.
でも今はクリステルを助けに行かないとね。
His eyes were fixed on the castle beyond the trees, where Crystal was supposed to be.
そうだね。早く行こう。クリステルの部屋に。
Her room should be on the top floor. Nodding firmly, Rami and I set off for the castle. Chapter 14, Rami. Evening Bell. Liechtenstein, Crown Castle, August 2nd, 2028, 2316, Wednesday, Gate. We waited till after sunset, then set about sneaking into the castle once it was dark. The underground passage we'd previously used was locked up. They must have found out we'd used it to escape. Instead, we looked for the spot where security was weakest, then climbed the high wall.
ほら、こっち。
Rami led the way, just as he had when we snuck into the mansion in Thun. On my way up the wall, I accidentally scraped the stone with a loud noise. I quickly held my breath, freezing in place. No one came to investigate, however. Rami nodded and then jumped down to the yard. I followed right after him. He carefully chose the ideal path to avoid guards and surveillance cameras. A few minutes later, we made it into the castle. Sneaking in had been strangely easy. Maybe we had Rami's skills to thank for that. He called himself the Great Phantom Thief because he had snuck into many mansions. Still, something didn't feel right.
変だな。
Rami said exactly what I was thinking.
誰もいない。外にはあんなに警備員がいたのに。
もしかしてどこかに拠点を移したとか。
If that was the case, things would get even more complicated. Our whole mission was to save Crystal.
わからない。とにかく急いでクリステルの部屋に行こう。上の方だって言ってたよね。
I mean, I'm sure they want to trap us and capture Mika. That would make sense.
ついてきて。
I mean, they still need her. It was my turn to take the lead. We ran through the castle cautiously and quietly. No matter how far we ventured, we didn't see a single soul. Was anyone even here? My unease only grew, but we couldn't stop now. Barely feeling the need to hide at this point, we ascended the stairs to the top floor. I know, they should really follow their gut feelings. Liechtenstein, Crown Castle, August 2nd, 2028, 23:30, Wednesday, Crystal's room. I slowly opened the door, then entered Crystal's room. Its ambiance was every bit as unusual as I remembered. Between the paintings plastered all over the walls and the outdated interior, it was hard to believe this was a little girl's room.
こんな部屋にクリステルがいるの？
うん、そのはずなんだけど。
I looked everywhere but saw no sign of Crystal. Silence reigned. My anxiety welled up, threatening to overflow.
人の気配がしない。この部屋にはいないみたいだ。
そんな。
I didn't know what Crown planned to do with her. With her fate so uncertain, we'd come here as fast as we possibly could. Now I panicked, thinking we might be too late.
きっと大丈夫だよ。ご飯食べてるとか、お風呂入ってるかもしれないし。
Rami stopped short and leapt backwards. He glared at something, like a cat bristling at a stranger. The very girl we were looking for emerged from the darkness.
クリステル。
なんで気配もなかったのに。
Her presence was so weak, Rami hadn't even noticed her. Something was wrong. The girl standing there was definitely Crystal, but she didn't feel like her. She staggered towards us, eyes unseeing. Perhaps Chancellor had said something terrible enough to break her spirit. The moment his cold-hearted, merciless face flashed through my mind, I rushed towards her.
クリステル、もう大丈夫だよ。助けに来たから。
The back of my hand flared with heat. Not knowing what happened, I stood stock still. Fluid slid off the back of my hand and dripped onto the ground. A red stain soaked the carpet below. Oh, jeez. We're going to meet somebody else with a superpower here.
Mika!
Rami grabbed my arm and yanked me backward. I could see Crystal's face over his shoulders. She stared at me, her eyes devoid of emotion. Her face was ghostly pale, without so much as a tinge of pink to her cheeks. Only then did pain shoot through the back of my hand. I looked down to see a cut in my flesh. The heat I felt was merely a delusion, one that came before the pain. What could have cut me? I gripped it with my other hand to stop the bleeding, flicking my gaze back to Crystal. She was holding a small pair of scissors, the kind made for children. Blood oozed down the blade.
クリステル
My brain failed to comprehend the fact that Crystal had cut me. I called her name in a daze. I wanted nothing more than to wake up from this nightmare, but Crystal started walking again, scissors swaying in her hand. Her lifeless eyes were locked onto me.
クリステル待って
ミカ、ダメだ
Rami stopped me when I went to run back to her.
何か変だ。クリステルは正気じゃない。
そんな
Crystal didn't hold back against Rami either. She raised her scissors to stab him. Rami jumped to avoid her attack, then snatched the scissors from her hand. Even after her scissors were taken away, Crystal didn't stop. She gnashed her teeth like a beast baring its fangs, grabbed a nearby chair, and swung it at us.
クリステル、待って
Crystal swung it down on us, but it was too heavy for her. It slipped from her grip and fell to the ground with a thud, missing us completely. Though it was practically impossible for her, she refused to give up. She reached for the chair again, dragging it by its legs.
クリステルもうやめて
I screamed her name, grabbed her arm, but none of it stopped her. She shook her head, struck out mindlessly with her fists, and kicked us with her tiny feet. While her hits and kicks weren't painful, the fact that she'd forgotten us broke our hearts.
クリステルお願いもうやめて
クリステル
We called out to her yet again, not knowing what else to do, but she didn't respond. Rather than her name, however, an unexpected phrase put an end to our struggle.
クリステルおやすみ
She tensed up, then went limp as a rag doll.
クリステル
Rami caught Crystal's unconscious body. She was breathing, but her eyelids were tightly closed. Chancellor was standing at the entrance of her room. That one phrase from him had put a stop to her rampage.
チャンセラーあなたクリステルに何をしたの
我らがドグマを授けたまでです
Chancellor slowly made his way to us. He smiled languidly, opening his arms.
彼女こそがクラウンの正当な指導者モナークとクイーンの座を受け継ぎし真の王となるべき器言葉を取り戻したハイリガーは我らがドグマを世に伝道する語り部となりこの欧州の象徴となるのです
I had no clue what he was saying. His steady delivery only made him sound more insane.
間もなくクラウンの悲願は成就しますうつし世の汚れを払う奇跡の雫によって
His ramblings were entirely incoherent. Rami retreated a step, holding Crystal in his arms. Unfortunately, iron bars had been installed on her window since last time we were here. With the window blocked off, our only escape route was through the door behind Chancellor. Light spilled in from the hallway, giving the man a radiant halo.
何言ってるかわかんないけどクリステルに何をした言えよ
あなた方と戯れたことによりハイリガーの魂は汚れてしまったのです言葉さえ取り戻せばよかったのにあなたたちは不浄なる知恵を聖女に与えたこれは看過できぬことなのです汚れた魂は浄化せねばなりません
Something shimmered in Chancellor's hand. It was a glass vial with the top sealed shut, the sort of ampule used to store chemicals and medicines. Rami grasped it as soon as he saw it. Wide-eyed, he shrank before the ampule in almost feline terror.
まさか。
これこそが魂をも浄化する奇跡の泉。ハイリガーを世俗から立つ者。ウルズの雫ですよ。
Rami's pupils dilated like he'd been consumed by rage. Blatant fury, the likes of which I'd never seen, rolled off of him in fierce waves. Rami was clearly losing his composure, and fast. He just barely managed to keep himself in check, likely thanks to Crystal's body warmth in his arms.
ラミ君。
これは完成したばかりの貴重な品ですが、アコライトにも授けて差し上げましょう。さあ、アコライト、あなたも回春を。さすれば我らがドグマを授けましょ
やめろ。
う。写し世の汚れを清め、ハイリガーの奇跡を保管するアコライトの使命を全うするのです。
やめろ。
Chancellor reached his hand out to me, but Rami smacked it away. At that very moment, an explosive boom echoed through the air, shaking the whole building. Oh, is it Camus?
これは何事ですか？
Chancellor seemed confused by the sudden turn of events. The impact had to be from an explosive, and I only knew one person capable of bombing a castle.
ラミ君、急いで逃げよう。
Rami wasn't even looking at me. His dilated pupils were fixed on Chancellor, or rather some specter from the past. He seemed terrified.
彼がその状態で逃げられますか？
Chancellor stood before us, blocking our way out. A smile was still plastered on his face.
ラミ君、大丈夫？
僕は平気だから。必ずクリステルを連れて逃げるから。先に行ってよ。
状況を記録するのか？
これでいいかな。
Say, I can't leave you behind. Pull yourself together. Grab my hand. Grab my hand?
ラミ君、私の手を掴んで。
I reached out, convinced I would drag him out of here if I had to. However, my hand brushed nothing but air. Devoid of emotion, Rami stared into space with Crystal still in his arms. He didn't notice me reaching for him at all. This is awful. What had come over him? While I couldn't identify the exact reason for his current state, I knew Chancellor was to blame. Meaning Rami wouldn't go back to normal unless we got away from Chancellor.
待ってて、ラミ君。今私が助けるから。
I glared at Chancellor, who loomed at the threshold. I need to do something about this. Well, I guess that wasn't the right decision. I don't know.
行き先を決めてくれ。
これでいいのか？
These really are guessing games. I mean, I don't really... I guess I can't leave you behind?
ラミ君とクリステルを置いていけるわけないよ。
The usual Rami could escape from any dangerous situation, but there was obviously something wrong with him now. His expression was tense, his body rooted to the spot.
僕なら大丈夫だからさ。
Even his voice was weak and trembling.
待ってて、ラミ君。今助けに行くから。
I was about to rush towards him when he raised a quivering hand to stop me.
君だけでも逃げてよ。
Rami sounded like he was suffering, looked like he was in pain, yet I couldn't lift a finger to help him.
私はラミ君を置いていかない。絶対に見捨てたりしないよ。
I grabbed the heavy chair Crystal failed to lift earlier, hoisting it up with all my might. I then hurled it in Chancellor's direction. He stepped to the side to dodge the chair, protecting the ampule. Our path through the door was no longer blocked.
ラミ君。
He was still in a daze. I took his arm, but he shook me off, like usual, for fear of being touched. Then he snapped to his senses.
急いで。
I lifted the unconscious Crystal from his arms and ran out of the room. Shocked as he was, Rami managed to follow. As we made our escape, another huge explosion reverberated through the castle. Our friends had to be nearby. Weird as it felt to be relieved by the sound of an explosion, we rushed towards the source of the blast.
みんな
お姉ちゃん
無事だったか。
助けに来ました。
It had been so long since I last saw them, I almost fell to pieces. I rushed over to make sure they were okay, then breathed a sigh of relief. My relief was short-lived, though. Several agents in black appeared out of nowhere.
いたぞ、あそこだ。
ハイリガーとアコライトは無傷で捕らえろとの指示だ。男どもは殺して構わん。
Bullets rained down on us. We took cover to avoid them, checking up on one another.
クリステルも一緒だな。
はい、この城で助け出しました。
Recalling Crystal's earlier fit, I couldn't say for sure whether she was truly safe. There was no time to explain, though.
みんなも無事でよかった。でもどうしてここに？
ラミーがインカムをあの列車の中に落としただろ。それで奴らの行き先が分かったんだよ。
By the time Hamiel turned towards him, Rami seemed back to his normal self. He blinked several times, then piped up in his usual cheerful voice.
マジ？じゃあお手柄じゃん。僕てっきり川の中で落としたんだと思ってたんだけどな。川ですか？うん。実は僕たち川に飛び込んで逃げたんだよ。橋の上からのダイビング、スリリングだったぜ。
なんだって？聞こえないな。
Rami's forced cheer was drowned out by the bullets hitting our cover. Hamiel did seem to notice Rami putting up a front, though.
とにかく状況の確認は逃げた後だ。
ああ、とっととこんな場所からは脱出するぞ。
神、やってくれ。
お任せください。
Camu pressed the detonator, sending another massive tremor throughout the building. They must have installed explosives in multiple areas.
背後からも襲撃だと。
他にも仲間がいるのかもしれない。誰かチャンセラーの無事を確認しろ。
Once the gunfire stopped, we leapt out of hiding and ran for the exit. As we fled, Camu lobbed smoke bombs at our pursuers to slow them down. Despite the lack of visibility, the agents kept on firing their guns. But all the bullets missed, hitting the ceiling or the floor instead. They merely popped off warning shots so as not to hit me or Crystal. And for that very reason, none of us feared the gunfire. We helped one another sprint down the path out of the castle, bolstered by our deep trust. Taking advantage of the chaos and confusion, we managed to escape safely. Even with all the commotion, Crystal didn't wake up. Just looking at her filled me with anxiety. The little girl was pale and exhausted.
クリステル。
大丈夫かな。なんかぐったりしてるけど。
クリステルは車で運ぼう。ラミー、ミカをバイクで頼む。
わかった。
Once Gibbs had Crystal inside the cabriolet, we hopped onto the bike. As Rami started the engine, the cabriolet rolled out.
あそこだ。逃がすな。
I heard the sound of a car speeding after us. Gibb leaned out of the window and shot out their tires. The agent's tires blew and their car went into a skid. Not ready to give up, they fired back at our vehicles. Rami held his breath at the sound of gunfire. He kept his eyes fixed firmly ahead, picking up speed without turning back. Thanks to the flat tires, the agents lost sight of us in an instant. The agent's car and their gunfire vanished far behind us. Only then did I breathe a sigh of relief. Rami didn't slow down one bit, though. He remained silent the whole time, visibly tense. On second thought, maybe it was anger or fear that gripped him. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The blustery winds were cold even in the middle of summer. Switzerland, Thun, August 3rd, 2028, 1932, Thursday. Hostel. We took a long way around to avoid being spotted, deciding to hide in Thun for the time being. We checked into hostels we'd stayed at before, then put the Oh, we checked in the hostel we stayed at before? Oh, seems like such a weird decision. Then put the unconscious Crystal to bed. It didn't seem like she was going to wake up anytime soon. Her breaths were steady and her complexion was all right, but I still fretted over her.
クリステル、大丈夫かな。
医者とか呼んだ方がいいんでしょうか。
残念だが、トゥーンに闇医者の知り合いはいないな。
私もだ。どこにも異常がないといいのだが。頭でも打ったのか。
いえ、実は。
Oh, we gotta catch the whole crew up. When I shared what we heard and saw in the castle, including Chancellor's bizarre rant, the others exchanged perplexed looks.
ウルズの雫？なんだそれは。
よくわからないが、クリステルはそのウルズの雫と呼ばれる妙な薬品を飲まされたせいで、二人を襲ったのだろうな。
おいおい、人の心を操る薬なんてさすがに口頭無形が過ぎるだろう。そんなもの実際に作れるとは思えないがな。
おそらく何らかの暗示によるものでしょう。ウルズの雫というのは人の意識をトランス状態にして暗示の効果を高める薬品なのかもしれません。
何にしてもまっとうな代物ではないな。
でもさっきのお姉ちゃんの話だと、クリステルってあのおじさんの娘なんでしょ。自分の娘にそんなことするなんてひどくない？
まったくだ
な。助けてきたのは正解だったが、薬で暗示をかけられているとなるとちょっと厄介だな。
そうですね。ラミー君たちの姿を見ても何も気にせず襲ってきたということは、かなり強力な効果があると考えられます。
となると、また目を覚ましたら同じように襲ってくるってことなのか。
それはないと思うよ。
Rami, who had been silent the whole time, finally spoke up. He turned away from the sleeping Crystal, then flashed his usual innocent smile.
多分朝には目を覚ますんじゃないかな。体に異常もないはずだし、もう暴れたりもしないと思う。
I mean, even if she attacks you, I mean, you guys, I'm sure, can handle a little girl. The moment Rami saw the chemical called the drops of Erd, it was like he reunited with a longtime enemy. He must have known something about it. As for where he'd learned about the drug, I didn't have a clue.
なんでそんなことがわかる？根拠でもあるのか？
勘だよ。大怪盗の勘ってやつさ。
Rami dodged the question, spinning it away from us.
僕、ちょっと散歩してくるよ。もしクリステルが起きたら優しくしてあげて。目を覚ましたら何も覚えてないはずだから。
With that, Rami left the room. Like always, he was as quiet as a ghost. The floorboards didn't so much as creak when he stepped on them. I suddenly feared he might disappear and never come back.
私、ラミー君の様子を見てきます。
Before the others could stop me, I dashed out of the room. Switzerland, Thun, August 3rd, 2028, 2011, Thursday, the plaza. The sun had started to set. I ran across the red-dyed cobblestones. Rami was already gone. Considering how fast and agile he was, I knew I'd lose him in a flash. Still, I chased after him. I wanted to follow him, to be with him. I had a feeling he was fighting demons I knew nothing about. I hadn't the slightest clue where he was, though. Maybe I need to zigzag through every single alley. He was nimble, so he might have climbed onto a roof. Or, surprising as it may be, he could have gone to an ordinary cafe. I felt clueless. We'd spent so much time together, yet I couldn't conceive of where he'd go at a time like this. For a moment, I thought I heard the sound of a bell around his neck. Then I remembered he'd taken it off at some point. Maybe he took it off when we snuck into a building because it'd get in the way, or he lost it when we were attacked in the mountains. By the way, he certainly wasn't wearing it now. Yet, when I turned around, I locked eyes with him. Rami raised his head when I approached, peering up at me like a child who'd been caught making mischief.
見つかっちゃった。
ラミー君。
僕、 隠れるのは得意だったんだけどな。歩いている人は誰もここに僕がいるなんて気づかなかったのに。すごいね。さすがは僕の弟子だ。
隣座っていい？
When he nodded, I sat beside him.
その鈴なくしちゃったと思ってた。まだ持ってたんだね。
うん。だって共同生活には必要なんだろ？
Rami stared at the bell, jingling it in between his fingertips. There was a hint of adoration in his eyes.
これを外したらハミエルがまたびっくりして怒るじゃん。だから一応持っておいたんだ。つけるのは気に食わないけどさ、飼い猫になったみたいだし。でもそれが共同生活ってやつかなって思って。
His voice was laced with admiration. I could sense just how much he cherished the idea of living with people, something he couldn't take for granted. I kept quiet and stayed beside him. A church bell tolled in the distance. The crowded twilight streets only made our silence more conspicuous.
どうして何も聞かないのさ。
Rami's eyes looked calm. Like he told me, he'd never had a family. He lived on the streets as a child, but he never found it hard. He was fine as long as he had friends, he insisted. But my gut told me he'd experienced something that wasn't fine at all. That was the reason he'd lost his composure at the sight of the ampule. He'd run away, refusing to tell us what he knew. I needed to tread carefully.
とりあえず記録しておけ。
これで問題ないか？
Okay, do I have to ask? Is it okay to ask? I'm not going to ask. Is it okay to ask?
聞いてもいいの？
My timid response seemed to trouble him.
どうかな。自分でもよくわからないや。
He flashed an ambiguous smile, dodging my question. The expression was only surface level, betraying the deep sadness lurking within him.
ねえ、無理して笑わなくてもいいんだよ。
無理なんてしてないって。本当に心配性だな。
There it was again. He made an effort to look at ease, trying to smile like normal. It pained me to see him like that. I decided not to ask him anything. He would open up to me if he really wanted to. Till then, all I could do was sit quietly beside him. Oh, really? What the- I keep forgetting she's like this very, very shy, timid Japanese girl, so she's not going to just, like, come out and say something. It's just not her style. I would because I'm rude. But, you know, I'm not going to ask.
聞かないよ。
え？
My curt refusal surprised him.
どうしてさ、気になったりしないの？
Honestly, I was. There were plenty of things I wanted to ask him, but I certainly didn't want to force him to tell me.
それはもちろん気にはなるけど、でも誰にだって話したくないことくらいあるでしょ。だから聞かない。
Yeah, I do feel that he was probably experimented on by Crown at some point in his early life. Seems like he recognized the ampule, and it's just a little too suspicious, right? Upon hearing my answer, Rami turned and regarded me with awe.
やっぱりミカはすごいね。
He then stared off into the distance, his mind wandering to another place and time. All I could do was stay quiet and gaze at his vulnerable profile.
そっか。何も言わないで一緒にいてくれるのって、なんだかいいね。
At long last, he huffed out a laugh. By this time, the noise of the crowd seemed softer than before. Thune was filled with the hustle and bustle of everyday life, from footsteps hurrying home to children promising to see each other tomorrow. Peaceful everyday life carried on around us, yet it was out of our reach. The gunfight from earlier felt like a distant dream.
あのさ。
Oh, hey, Elmar's here. Someone's voice overlapped with what Rami was about to say.
師匠。エルマ。
The boy we'd seen on our last visit to Thune stood a little way away. He rushed over with a big smile.
よかった。師匠もお姉ちゃんも警察に捕まってなかったんだね。
エルマくん。
His smile was a welcome sight, considering how upset he was about the orphanage's impending closure and the idea of being separated from his comrades.
よかった。元気そうで。今は
Oh, whoops. Now she's talking slowly. What the heck?
よかった。元気そうで。今はどうしてるの？
At my tentative question, Elmar's smile grew even wider.
それがさ、孤児院が潰れずに済んだんだ。
え、マジで？
そうなんだよ。実はうちの孤児院に新しい勇者が現れたって院長先生が言ってたんだ。
勇者。それってもしかして有志者のこと？
Oh, pretty much the same thing.
あ、それそれ。すっごい親切な人なんだ。その人がお金出してくれたおかげで、今まで通り孤児院で暮らせるようになったんだ。
One of the new investors' crown, and they just want to experiment on the kids in the orphanage like they did with Rami.
そっか。
よかった。じゃあみんな今も一緒なんだね。
すっげえ幸せだよ。
Elmar's grin was incredibly bright. I didn't see any worrying signs on his face. He seemed perfectly healthy, meaning he'd eaten well. Like he said, he was really happy. What a relief, truly. We couldn't do anything for him back then. We tried to help in morally questionable ways, yet someone out there was willing to extend a righteous helping hand. There was no need for Elmar to commit a crime to begin with. Maybe the director was right when he called us demons who enticed an innocent to sin.
やべえ、買い出しの途中だったんだ。聞いてよ、実は俺今日が誕生日なんだ。だから院長先生がケーキ買ってくれるって言ってさ、それを買いに来たんだ。
誕生日。
ありがとう。じゃあ俺。
そっか。お誕生日おめでとう、エルマーくん。
Thanks, I'll be going then.
うん。誕生日おめでとう。幸せになれよ。
Yeah, I don't get good feelings about what's happening to the orphanage.
師匠もお姉ちゃんとうまくやるよ。
After saying something oddly mature, Elmar ran off. I watched him hug the director who'd been searching for him. Elmar chatted away with an adorable expression. The director smiled and listened, stroking the boy's hair. Even though they weren't related by blood, they looked like a real family.
よかったな、エルマ。
うん。私たちも帰ろっか。
うん、そうだね。クリステルが起きた時、部屋にいるのがあんな奴らばっかじゃ不安だろうし。
Rami draped the bell he'd been fiddling with around his neck. Though fugitives like us had no true home to return to, we still had a place to belong among our peculiar circle of friends. We turned our backs on Elmar and the director, then set off for the hostel.
誕生日か。
Rami's murmur startled me. He told me he didn't know his age or his birthday.
あんまこれまで気にしたことってないんだけど、誕生日って どんなもんなの？やっぱり嬉しい？
じゃあ試しに今日これから誕生日会をしてみる？
今日？
そう、ラミーくんの誕生日ってことにして誕生日会をしてみるの。そうしたら嬉しいかどうかわかるんじゃないかな。
誕生日会。
His voice was filled with longing. He said the words over and over again, like a child memorizing a foreign phrase for the first time.
ミカが僕のためにやってくれんの？
ラミーくんがやってみたければだけど。
じゃあやってみたいな。
Rami nodded, a bashful look on his face.
じゃあ買い物していこっか。
ああ、でも待って。誕生日会をしたら今日が僕の誕生日ってことになっちゃうよな。
そうなるかな。
それならもっと別の日がいいな。
別の日？もっと特別な日付にしたいってこと？
そうだな。せっかくの誕生日なんだから絶対に忘れない日付にしたいじゃん。
We could go with an obvious choice like Christmas or maybe even New Year's. Either of those would be unforgettable. I spent some time contemplating dates he would approve of until Rami let out a gasp.
ミカと出会った日とかどうかな。
私と出会った日？確か7月16日だけど、でもそれって護送車で運ばれた日だよね。
あ、本当だ。誕生日に逮捕されたことになっちゃった。
Laughing, Rami fixed his gaze on me. He didn't look sad about it. In fact, he looked brighter than ever.
でもその日がいいんだ。7月16日。きっと僕はあの日に生まれたんだよ。
いいの？
うん。僕の誕生日は君と出会った日にする。だってあの日に僕は変わっちゃったから。だからさ、来年の夏になったらお祝いしてよ。
I didn't understand what he meant when he said he changed. More importantly, I had no idea where we would be next year. Yet, it was for that very reason that I nodded in agreement. If we made a promise, I had a feeling next year would be a peaceful one.
わかった。じゃあ来年の7月16日にはラミーくんの誕生日パーティーをしようね。
Oh, geez. Doing this means either Miko is gonna die or Rami's gonna die.
楽しみだな。
Rami ran off with light steps, never making a sound. The lingering sunbeams cast a long shadow on the street. I followed Rami as he slipped into the shade between the buildings. Oh, do we have another character? Chapter 15, Rami, Chance Meeting. Ooh, that was a short chapter, wow. Switzerland, Thun, August 4th, 2028, 8:02, Friday, Hostel. The next morning, Crystal woke up without issue, as though it was just another day. We all held our breath, watching her stretch and sit up in bed.
クリステル、よかった。目を覚まして。
あれミカ、ここは。
ようやくお姫様のお目覚めだな。
具合はどうだ？
なんか変な感じとかない？
痛かったりとか気持ち悪かったりとか異常はありませんか？
ここはどこ？どうしてみんなここにいるの？お城に連れ戻されたはずなのに。
Just as Rami said, Crystal didn't seem to remember anything. Rami smiled at the confused little girl.
大丈夫。 悪い魔王の城からお姫様を助け出したんだ。ここには怖い奴はいないよ。
Yeah, they definitely used the drug on Rami at some point in time. Although, if the drug was working, then he shouldn't remember anything. Maybe it was some sort of subconscious reaction? I don't know.
みんなが助けてくれたの？
そう。嫌だった？
私、みんなにまた会いたかった。でも、どうやって？
クリステルが寝てる間にこっそり迎えに行ったのさ。
Rami maintained his smile, avoiding any mention of the drug. Having heard that, Crystal's eyes lit up with joy. Yeah, they didn't really mention fixing Mika's wounds. I guess maybe they assumed that they would have done that at some point in time while they were in the cave, I guess? Her innocent, beaming face came as a relief to us all. She showed no sign of attacking like she had the day before. The girl in our care was the Crystal we knew so well. Of course, this could be like another, Cosmic Fantasy 2 situation where it's like, oh yeah, here's this magical pendant. Just go and defeat the bad guy. And then you come back after all that adventure and you find out that the girl wearing the pendant died because it used up all her power. I was like, oh, Jesus. I love that game, but that was one of the most bummer endings I've ever had in a video game. With a big nod, Crystal got out of bed. I helped her change, and we made breakfast together. And just like that, the mundane life we used to have returned to us.
それで確認をしておきたいのだが、クリステル、君はあの城にもう戻りたくないということで間違いないか？
Once we'd finished our meal, Gib asked Crystal with the sobering delivery of a man in a courtroom. Crystal nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line.
いや、入りがって呼ばれるのも、お城に閉じ込められるのも、いや。
そっか。
それではこれからどうします？多分チャンセラーは諦めず追ってくると思うんですが。
そうだな。あの時一応逆方面へ車を走らせたから、今頃ミュンヘンあたりを探しているとは思うが。サリー。
任せて。バッチリ。トゥーンに怪しい車は入ってきてないよ。次、ミュンヘンあたり探しとくね。
案外素直な奴らだな。あとは連中をどうやって出し抜くかだが。
こちら側に来ていないならば、しばらくトゥーンに潜伏しながら遠方への逃亡準備を整えた方がいいかもしれないな。
でもどこに行くつもりだ？
空港は使えませんしね。船とかですか？
Listening to our conversation, Crystal sadly lowered her lashes and quietly murmured an apology.
ごめんなさい。
クリステルが謝る必要なんてないよ。
でも、パパのせいで。
We exchanged glances upon seeing how dispirited she was.
俺たちは逃げるのが仕事みたいなものだからな。追われるのには慣れてるさ。
Hamio smiled and reassured her that it wasn't that big of a deal. If we kept discussing our plans, we'd wind up talking about all of Chancellor's evil deeds. As I wondered how best to handle this delicate situation, Rami rose from his seat.
それよか。クリステルってあまり外に出たことないんだろ？せっかくだし観光に行かね？
観光？
大丈夫。 遠くには行かないよ。でもほら、いつ遊べなくなるかわからないんだ。だからいっぱい外の景色を見せときたいじゃん。せっかくだしトゥーン城でも見に行こうよ。ミカも一緒にさ。
そうだね。
We had no idea when our leisurely time together would come to an end. Not me, not Crystal, and not our friends. For as long as the agents in black weren't close by, I wanted to show Crystal the outside world. Even during our short stay in Lugano, she gazed at the scenery with pure awe and admiration.
そうだな。じゃあクリステルには2人の子守をお願いするか。その間に大人たちはこれからのことを決めておくよ。
Hamio flashed a smile at Crystal. Judging by what he said, Rami and I had essentially been assigned to escort her. His flippant tone was meant to help smooth things over, so Rami and I didn't protest.
そういうこと。ほら、クリステル、行こう。
Switzerland, Thun, August 4th, 2028, 10:03 Friday, Plaza. Crystal walked the bustling streets with her head on a swivel.
あれは何？あれはお花屋さんだよ。
あれは土産物屋じゃないかな。ほら、スイスの国旗が書いてあるカップとかナイフとか売ってるだろ。
カップにスイスの国旗、なんで書いてあるの？
なんでかな。かっこいいから。
変なの。
There sure are a lot of souvenirs with the Swiss flag on them. Crystal seemed keenly interested in anything and everything. Rami and I took turns answering her questions. Rami held her hand so they wouldn't get separated. I couldn't do the same, but... Crystal clutched the hem of my skirt, sweetly peering up at me. Her eyes implored me, "Stay close by, Mika." It made me so happy I broke out into a smile. Our little trio walked the streets of Thun, looking every bit like a family of three. A young family of three. Switzerland, Thun, August 4th, 2028, 10:16, Friday, outside castle. As soon as we arrived at Thun Castle, our hopes of visiting were dashed. It was temporarily closed. We couldn't get in.
嘘だろ？臨時休業って。
I know, what luck, huh?
はあ、なんでだよ。せっかくクリステルにいろいろ見せてやろうと思ってたのに。
お城やってないの？でも明日はやってるみたいだから、今日は諦めてまた明日来よっか。明日。
Crystal nodded, a broad smile on her face. She seemed content with that. Except Rami was clinging to the closed gate, reluctant to leave.
はあ、なんでよりによって今日が休みなんだよ。
ラミー君も見たかったの？
当たり前じゃん。せっかくの観光なんだしさ。こういうとこちょっと入ってみたかったんだよ。普通の観
Rami pouted, sulking. The look in his eyes reminded me of when he spoke about wanting a birthday party.
こういうとこちょっと入ってみたかったんだよ。普通の観光客としてさ。
A regular tourist, he says. Though we'd visited so many cities, the only place we'd enjoyed as tourists was Konstanz. And back then, everyone was simply trying to make me happy. I couldn't say whether they themselves were having a good time. Now it was my turn to make things fun.
少し休憩しましょうか。
これで OK？
Okay, we are reaching the top of the hour, so why don't we stop it there? This is meowmurai. You've been watching Despera Drops, running on a Nintendo Switch 2. Yeah, you know, I think Rami's he's got a taste of what normal life is, could potentially be, and He's super curious about it, obviously. Who knows what's going to happen in the end, whether they get that or not. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. I will see you at the next stream.